I saw his hand close around my daughter's wrist before my body understood what it was seeing. A small, practiced grab, possessive, almost casual. Like he'd done it 100 times and expected the world to keep nodding along. The ceramic mug in front of me vibrated against the saucer as I stood. Chairs squealed. A dozen conversations stuttered into silence. I stepped between them and said as calmly as I could, "Let go of her." He did, more from calculation than conscience. "Mr. Davidson." Crisp shirt, butter-warm smile cracked down the middle, the kind of nice face that schools love to feature in fundraising brochures. He straightened, adjusted his collar, and gave the room a look that said this was all a misunderstanding. Behind me, Emma pressed her wrist to her chest, trying to hide the fresh red marks that were already rising like a ghost of his touch. "This is a setup," he whispered, close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "You're trying to trap me. For what?" I asked, and heard my voice from somewhere far away, steady, measured, like a lawyer in a TV courtroom. "For abusing my 13-year-old daughter? For threatening her grades? For coercion, intimidation, and everything else you dressed up as love." He looked toward the glass, the street beyond, the reflection of himself in the cafe window, as if the city might answer for him. People were staring. Jessica, at the corner table, had her phone up, filming. Davidson's jaw flexed. "I'll have her expelled," he said softly. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "On the contrary," I said. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with." I thought of his brother, our police chief, who'd stood in our PDA meeting weeks ago with glossy pamphlets about protecting our children. I thought of his parents' names on our school's gymnasium plaque and his wife in the front row of every board meeting, smiling while the superintendent said words like excellence and trust. I thought of the nights I lay awake memorizing the passcodes to backup clouds and burner accounts, learning the angles of hall windows where the orchestra room could be seen, buying a recording device shaped like a pen, and tapping it against my knee while I practiced keeping my hands still. I didn't blink. I didn't move. "Try it," I told him, and then I did the scariest thing I had done since becoming a mother. I turned my back on the man who had broken my child and I wrapped my arms around her instead. Emma trembled, her ribs ticking against my hands. The detective's card burned in my pocket. Jessica's phone kept recording. Davidson hovered, searching for a crack to slide through. When he didn't find one, he walked out, eyes already glassy with calculations, fingers already composing a narrative in which he was the wronged one. Some stories make their shape only in hindsight. This one was different. This one snapped into its outline that afternoon in a coffee shop, as if it had been waiting to be drawn, as if we were only tracing a picture the truth had already drawn for us. I used to believe I would recognize a threat as it approached, the rumble of footsteps, the shadow under the door, a smell of smoke. That belief feels childish now, like the way I used to believe thunder couldn't harm you because it was only sound. Danger isn't always loud. Sometimes it slips into your house in clean shoes, with graded essays and the keys to the supply closet. 2 months earlier, I had been a mother with normal worries. The grocery bill. The news. The sudden, bewildering way an almost teenage girl can swing from laughing to silence because a joke lands crooked. Emma had always been brilliant at not caring about school in any performative way. She liked learning, but hated the theater of it. And then, one Monday morning, she sprang up before her alarm, choosing an outfit with careful fingers, smoothing her hair, humming in the mirror. "What's got into you?" I teased. "Secret crush." She flushed to her ears. "Don't say that, Mom," she snapped, too sharp. It was like walking into a room where the furniture had been slightly rearranged. You couldn't quite say what was different, only that you kept bumping into corners that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Davidson," she said like the name itself was sunshine. "We have him for history every day now. He makes it fun." I smiled, because that's what you do when a child who used to feign illness at the mention of World War anything suddenly loves a class. I smiled, because I didn't yet understand that predators don't begin with wolves' teeth. They began with candy and applause. After that, there were small things, which is to say there were everything. The way a compliment from him sent her drifting through the evening like a balloon. The way a day without his attention left her stabbing at her food like it had offended her. The way she began to dress in versions of herself that felt less like costumes and more like assignments. The way she stared at her phone, then away, then back again, cheeks warm with a private weather I could not yet predict. "Maybe it would be good to switch your schedule," I said once casual. Too much history in a row makes anyone cranky. Silence. It wasn't sullen silence exactly. It was a falling elevator. It was my daughter looking straight through me, turning, leaving, her fingers already curled around a phone that lit up with someone else's words. People ask what made me look. They want a singular moment. The ringing bell, the dropped handkerchief, the sentence that didn't fit. They want a flash of cinematic insight that turns your life from before to after. It wasn't like that. It was less noble. It was a mother's dread chewing through the inside of my throat and no one else in the house awake at 2 a.m. to tell me I wasn't crazy. It was the memory of her small, fever-hot hand on my chest when she was 3 and we were in an ER because she couldn't breathe and I had to be the one to hold still while they pressed a mask to her face and she thrashed and sobbed and trusted me anyway. I looked. I wish I could say I asked first. I wish I could say I waited for the perfect conversation. I did not. I unlocked the only thing in my house I'd ever sworn I wouldn't unlock, and in doing so I found a door I couldn't close again. The backup email account didn't even try to hide itself once I knew to look. The folder was named in a way that would have looked innocent to anyone else. Practice notes. The subject lines were worse than any content warning I could prepare myself for. He wrote like a poet of counterfeit souls. Mature for your age. Special. Meant to be. Transcend. He fed words to a 13-year-old that adults know how to spit out and children swallow whole. I breathed through my nose so the sound of it wouldn't wake her. I took pictures, timestamps, headers, the places where he told her to delete. I photographed the gifts in her bag, things she would never have bought with her allowance, wrapped with tissue as if to say the shop would vouch for him. I held a tube of lipstick that was not for children and felt, for the first time in my life, the impulse to throw something until it broke. Instead, I took another photo. Evidence is a cruel word. It asks you to shape your grief into something admissible. He was insulated, of course he was. At our PDA, his brother's badge flashed. His parents' name gleamed on the booster wall. His wife held court in the 3rd row with her clipboard and unlimited confidence. He didn't just teach history. He toured the building with it draped around his shoulders like a cape. When rotten men know the right hands to shake, calling them rotten doesn't help. You have to show the stain. So I started to watch the hallways. I volunteered in the main office, stapling forms and sorting mail with an efficiency born of terror. I learned the rhythms of 3rd period. How the orchestra room fell quiet when the student musicians scattered, how the hallway camera angled just shy of the door, how teachers' voices carried just enough to climb into a mother's ear through the narrow window pane. What I saw was never graphic. It didn't have to be. You don't need graphic when you have proximity. He leaned in too close. He lingered. He made the air around her a test she could pass if she just cooperated. On a Thursday I will never forget, he sat on a piano bench with a 7th grader named Sarah and spoke to her in the same sentences he'd written to my child. I recorded through the crack in the door. My hands shook, but the picture held. I did everything the way you're supposed to do nothing. I installed an app disguised as a calculator. I backed up everything twice, then 3 times, then printed some of it and slid the pages into a folder with a grocery list on top. I watched documentaries with Emma about consent and power and the way hurt can wear a friendly face. She fidgeted, bit her nails, left the room and came back, eyes glassy with thought. I did not push. I held out a rope and tried not to yank. Then came the day she locked herself in the bathroom and I heard the kind of crying that doesn't have sound at the beginning, only a sucking of air, a drowning on land. He said if I loved him, I would. She choked, and I felt the floor tilt. We don't print the details of children's pain here. Not because they don't matter, but because our respect does. The truth is enough. He harmed her. He pressured her. He crossed every line and then tried to erase the evidence with the authority he wore like a uniform. We drove to urgent care because I lied on the form and said severe abdominal pain, and because lying felt like the only way to tell the truth safely, at least for a day. Dr. Martinez, kind eyes, steady hands, took one look at my face and knew I wasn't asking for a postponement out of denial but strategy. 24 hours, she said. But then I report. Love isn't only about soothing. Sometimes it's about timelines and statutes and knowing which door to knock on first. Back home, I made encrypted folders and redundant backups and a plan. The texts began. The whiplash from worried to punitive, the sudden decency that soured into threat the second she didn't reply. Your grade is suffering. You know how much I care. Don't do something you'll regret. All of it used the vocabulary of guidance while tightening like wire around her future. He escalated. He showed up at our front door with a folder and a smile and a note tucked like a weapon inside. He told her, in a dozen ways, that he was the only adult who could guarantee her path forward, and that the price of that guarantee was silence. Her anger broke over me like a wave she didn't ask for. You're ruining my life, she sobbed, which is what a trapped child says when she's been taught that escape is betrayal. I held that sentence in my hands like a hot coal and let it burn without letting go. It wasn't her voice. It was his, puppeteering through her fear. We planned the coffee shop because public places are less easily rewritten. He wanted his classroom. He wanted the space he controlled. Door, blinds, narrative. He said yes to the cafe after the long pause of someone calculating optics. I sat 2 tables away with a pen that hummed with a hidden recorder. Jessica watched from the corner. Emma's hands trembled as she tucked hair behind her ear and said the words we'd rehearsed. Grades, essay, future. He said the words he always used. Special, mature, connection. He told my child that numbers didn't matter, then used numbers to threaten her anyway. Age is just a number. Your transcript is a number I can ruin. When she told him about the test, he snapped like a trap. You're lying. You're trying to trap me. Then the promise he pressed like a thumb. We'll take care of it. No one needs to know. When coercion is cornered, it often reaches for anger. His fingers on her wrist. His breath sharp enough to cut. Then the soft threat again. Expulsions, recommendations. A future he would gatekeep until she learned to say thank you for the keys he'd stolen. We called the state police before his brother could rehearse his way into the story. Detective Margaret Chin listened like a person who'd heard this music before and still refused to let it become background noise. She photographed the marks on my child's wrist as if she were archiving a piece of truth that would otherwise be denied by people with louder microphones. Emma sat through a forensic interview and told a stranger the pieces we had agreed to say aloud. When she came out, she looked the same and also older, like the portrait artist had drawn a finer line at the corner of her mouth. You did it, I told her. You told the truth. Sometimes the only thing to say when victory looks like exhaustion is you did it. They arrested him that night. Someone took a photo and posted it online. I didn't share it. I don't keep trophies. But I didn't cry when I saw the handcuffs. I thought of the girls who would never sit on a piano bench with him now. The next morning, rumors spidered through the school. Phones lit up. Parents whispered in doorways. A few stood apart from the murmur, faces pinched, as if the story itself was an accusation against their comfort. Some people can't bear a truth that wasn't theirs to find. More families came forward. A pattern emerged with bleak precision. Compliments, special attention, gifts, secrecy, escalation, grades as leverage. His devices were seized. His search history became evidence. His wife found a folder that made her go still. His brother tried to swagger through jurisdiction and was escorted out by a woman who said conflict of interest and meant it. The school board convened an emergency meeting and used words like oversight and policy while a gym full of parents asked why it takes our daughters bleeding for oversight to notice the wound. My daughter's body remembered what had been done to it. It remembered in nausea and blood draws and ultrasounds that made her look away. A doctor with gentle hands explained options without ever using the kind of language that shifts blame onto the small shoulders that already ache. Stress can weave itself into the body's decisions. Our house learned to be quiet in certain hours. We placed water beside the bed and sat on the floor when sitting in chairs felt too high. And then, because life doesn't ask your permission to break again, she lost the pregnancy. At the kitchen table, I held her while she sobbed. There is no correct response to a loss that came from violence. There is only the shape of your child's grief and the way you refuse to let it hollow her out. You are not broken, I told her. You are not at fault. Your body is not your enemy. You are allowed to feel everything. She nodded against me. That little knot that means, I don't believe it yet, but I hear you. The prosecutor reviewed the case and did not look away. When the offer of a quiet deal slithered in, she declined. Court, she said like a vow. The trial was never going to feel like triumph. Trials rarely do when the body on the stand belongs to someone you used to rock to sleep. Emma testified by video. A specialist sat with her while she spoke into the lens. She didn't tell sensational stories. She told the clean, razor-edged truth. He used his position. He pushed and threatened and called it love. He punished with grades and praise. The defense tried to drag her into their shadow with that old word consent, as if the presence of a child's yes makes an adult's decision ethical. The prosecutor cut the word in half with another, power. Parents we didn't know sat in the courtroom, hands knitted. Teachers sat too, some faces wet, some set. The jury looked at the evidence and needed only 3 hours to return the only answer that made the air breathable. Guilty on all counts. His brother sat in uniform, the emblem on his chest shining under the lights, and for once the shine didn't protect anything. At sentencing, Emma read a statement that did not sound like a child because a child did not write it, experience did. She talked about trust as a fragile architecture and how easy it is to knock down the scaffolding of a mind that is still learning to stand. She talked about how every future conversation with a teacher would now require a moment to check her own systems for panic. She talked about mornings, about the ordinary heroism of getting out of bed while fear tries to hold you down by the ankles. Other girls spoke, too, and the room filled with a choir of voices that predators count on never converging. The judge listened, then gave him years that will not give anyone back their time, but which at least pull him out of the stream where other children swim. Our school district apologized in headings and bullet points. They wrote new policies and ordered training, which is a start but not a shelter. It matters that some people resigned. It matters more that new people stepped in and said, we will be the kind of grown-ups we wish we'd had in the room. Healing was not cinematic. It had no montage. It was paperwork and therapy appointments and days when she came home from school with the look of someone who has done battle with a benign question. Where is your homework? Because benign questions echo louder in places that used to be unsafe. It was Mia at our table setting flashcards down between us with a gentleness I will never forget. It was Jessica texting at odd hours. Court date moved. I'll drive. It was me learning that vengeance and justice are not synonyms, and that both taste like ash unless they lead to safety. Emma's world grew back slowly. New school. New routes to the library. A debate team where she learned to lace logic to her fury and send both out together in a way that felt like reclaiming. The first time a male teacher asked her to stay after class to discuss an essay, she froze, breath shuddering. When she told him why, he stepped into the hallway, door open, and said, "We can talk here." Later, he sent home a note, respectful, brief, thanking us for telling him what she needed. It is a small thing to hold a door open. It is not a small thing when you're the person who needs the door held. I learned how to convert our experience into maps for other families. On Friday afternoons, I sat with parents who walked into the advocacy office with faces like mine had been, stretched thin over a terror that didn't yet have a name. I taught them how to forward emails without breaking the chain of custody, how to back up a phone to a cloud that couldn't be quietly emptied, how to use the words that systems require: coercion, power imbalance, threat, pattern. We do not owe systems our souls. We do owe ourselves the language to make systems listen. Davidson's brother resigned. Headlines said this and that. The story will keep being told in different tones depending on who benefits from each version. What I know is that a uniform does not make a protector. Protecting is when a detective keeps her expression neutral, so your child doesn't have to watch her flinch. Protecting is when a teacher moves his chair 20 inches because he sees the fear in a student's eyes and adjusts without being asked. Protecting is a skill, not a title. Years have passed, and still the coffee shop exists in me like a room I can enter without touching a door. If I close my eyes, I can feel the weight of the pen in my hand and the way Emma's fingers trembled around a paper cup. I remember the way his voice sharpened when the story stopped behaving for him. I hear my own voice saying, on the contrary, and understand now that I wasn't only speaking to him. I was speaking to the part of myself that thought I had to be liked to be believed. I was speaking to the mother in me, who had been taught to be small for the sake of other people's comfort. That voice is not small anymore. It has the weight of knowing. I keep a photo on my desk of Emma in her cap and gown, tassel crooked, smile unguarded in a way I thought we might never see again. Behind the photo is a folder of thank you notes, some shaky handwriting, some typed and printed and signed with hearts, that say variations of the same sentence. You helped us believe ourselves. Most days that's enough. Some days nothing is. On those days, I brew the good coffee and text my daughter an ordinary question about something small, like whether the plant on her windowsill needs a bigger pot, and we talk about dirt and roots, and the conversation gives shape to the word future without either of us having to say it. People ask me what justice felt like. Sometimes I say it felt like air. Sometimes I say it felt like a door that locked from our side. The truth is that justice felt like Emma's voice, steady in a room designed to make her whisper. It felt like the moment she looked at me in the car after a difficult therapy session and said, "I want to help other kids someday." In that sentence was everything that had been stolen and everything she took back. If I could speak to the version of me who opened that email at 2 a.m, I would place my hands on her shoulders and tell her 3 things. First, you are not paranoid. Paranoia is fear without evidence, and you are a mother with evidence, and your fear is a compass, not a curse. Second, you will find allies, some expected and some you don't even know yet. They will hold up parts of the sky you can't. Let them. Third, this story will not end where you think it must end. It will grow past courtrooms and policies and headlines and into ordinary mornings where your child will drink coffee that isn't tinged with dread and laugh at something dumb and feel, for hours at a time, like a person whose future belongs only to her. None of this makes what happened okay. Nothing will. But healing is not an apology to the past. It's a life built in spite of it. Emma's life is not a case file. It is a campus path at sunset, a book open on her bed, a text that says, "Guess what I learned today?" A call where we don't talk about him at all. It is the day she turned her phone face down on the table, looked out the window of a cafe that no longer felt like a battlefield, and said, "I'm good, Mom." Really, I believed her. And in believing her, I began to believe myself again.